Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remus.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Hope you had an awesome weekend. It is, it's a Monday, a very busy Monday today on the program, and the countdown is on to Sunday afternoon at IG Field. And the Bombers looking to win one more game and get to Regina for the Grey Cup and try and win a third consecutive Grey Cup. We're going to hit that a little bit later on. Ed Tait from BlueBombers.com with an update on the Bombers who were practicing all weekend, getting ready for next Sunday. And the Hammer, Jeff Hamilton, coming on a little bit later on. A number of things we're going to touch on with Jeff, but certainly the Canadian Football League finals in both the East and the West Division. Of course, a little bit more on the Winnipeg Jets. We'll be all over the Jets right off the top. Our guy Sean Reynolds of Kenny and Rennie fame and all the great work he does on Sportsnet going to jump on in just a couple minutes live from the rink. Jets practice this morning. We'll hear what Bones had to say and look ahead to a big first-place battle tomorrow night between the Winnipeg Jets and the Dallas Stars for the top of the Central Division. A crazy weekend. And as I said, we're going to talk a lot of Jets with Sean coming up in a few minutes. We'll get to the Canadian Football League chat with Ed and Jeff a little bit later on. But man, there was a lot going on. First of all, many of you, like myself, probably had their hearts in their throat Saturday when we saw Alphonso Davies leave his Bayern Munich game with a suspected hamstring injury. Our worst fears are avoided. Alphonso Davies will represent Canada and play in the World Cup, although he will not be playing the final two games of Bayern's schedule before the league's break to head to Qatar. So that was great news. The Astros won the World Series. So the baseball season is behind us. Pretty incredible season, an incredible team by that Astros crew. And the Magic just ended up falling short for the Philadelphia Phillies. Touch on that a little bit later on as well. And then, unfortunately, with all the great hockey that was played on the ice, the biggest hockey story of the weekend was the Boston Bruins' epic incompetence in signing Mitchell Miller and then 48 hours later renouncing the rights, kind of like happened a couple years ago when the Coyotes drafted him in the first place. Shocking, to be honest, from one of the teams that really is looked up to as one of the model franchises in the National Hockey League. So we'll get to all of that. Moose split on the weekend. Lost on Friday night. Alex Limoges was the big gun yesterday, scoring both goals in a 2-1 overtime win. And don't look now, but do the Jets maybe have a top goaltending prospect? Been a great start to the season for Oskari Salmon, and maybe dive into his numbers a little bit more later on. And the Ice just keep on rolling. 15-1 now on the season after their win over Tri-Cities Saturday night at the Ice Cave. And man, is tomorrow going to be a great day for hockey fans in Winnipeg. We're going to dive into this first place matchup between the Jets and Stars with Rennie in just a second. But maybe the most anticipated game in a long time in Canadian junior hockey is going to be happening tomorrow night in our city as well. And it's not just Tuesday, but Wednesday as well, because the Red Deer Rebels are here to take on the Winnipeg Ice at 15-0 on the season. So you got a 15-0 team on the road. You got a 15-1 team at home. It's going to be an unbelievable couple of games. And the Ice, in addition to tomorrow being their 2 for Tuesday promotion, have a deal where you can get 2 games for the price of 1. Now, Brian Munz is going to join us tomorrow on the program, but if you do want to take in those Ice games, what you're going to want to do is get on over to the Winnipeg Ice website for more details on the 2-for-1 deal. Get your tickets and show up tomorrow at the Ice Cave. So no shortage of great sports on the docket coming up this week. Of course, the countdown is on to Sunday at IG Field. Cannot wait to see what the Bombers can do up against the upstart BC Lions, who eliminated the Calgary Stampeders yesterday, and we certainly will get to that. Just before we bring in our good friend Sean Reynolds, got to give a big shout out to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day, including Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Not Auto Corp, Consolidated Supply, Vita Health Fresh Market, Wallace & Wallace, Culligan Water, Royal Sports, F Apparel, Little Brown Jug, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, of course, our friends at Canadian Club Whiskey as well. Let's get to it. Rennie coming up a little early. Marima's, I'm sure, will pop by later on this week, but he's still kind of getting the swing of things now with 2 kids under the same home. And Sean's been kind enough to join us live from the rink just after Jets practice. Rennie, what's up? How was the weekend?
Great weekend. It's fun covering hockey when you're seeing good hockey being played consistently. And speaking of that, I'm looking in front of me at the Dallas Stars, who are currently first in the Central Division. They're out here practicing. I love Bones was talking today about the Jets, saying it was a really high-tempo practice, and he was slamming his stick and getting really excited. And he said, hey, we're going to have to play a high-tempo game if we want to have success against the Dallas Stars. And so I had to keep them up to speed during practice. You got to practice fast if you want to play fast. So that's a little bit of a look at what we can expect tomorrow night.
Hey, just before we dive into the game on the weekend and a look ahead to tomorrow, it was great to see you on Saturday. Can you confirm for the people that I did, in fact, put the F Apparel suit on and I was there in attendance watching the game in the press box for the first time in forever alongside you with the gang on Saturday afternoon?
Listen, I like to be a sharp-looking guy. I like to dress well when I'm going to the games. I don't like it when people are trying to show me up, and that's what I thought you were trying to do there, Huss. You walked in looking good, looking sharp, had a seat down beside me. It was like we were having a suit off or something like that. I was like, wait a minute, this isn't the Huss I know. But yeah, you came in, you were looking sharp, looking dapper. And I got to tell you, man, I'm one of these guys, and I noticed this early when I started covering hockey. When I'm watching hockey, I love to talk about it. I love to point out that play there and that play there. And sometimes you'll sit down beside people who are like, shut up. I'm trying to do my job. I'm trying to watch the game here. I'm trying to do this. And then sometimes I'll sit by people who are just like that. I had a blast watching the game with you because you're like me. We like to just sit there and pop out and we see this and you see that and all those kind of things. I love talking hockey, especially while it's happening. And we had a fun time doing that on Saturday.
Well, we certainly did. It was a blast. And as I said, I'm usually in the seats, but I didn't have my seats for that game. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go up and say what's up to the fellas. And I needed to make sure that I mean, guys like you raise the bar quite high. And then there's John Liu. And by the way, I mean, John Liu's drip is on a whole nother level. But I need to grow into the level that I can pull off some looks like John Liu and still look appropriate while rocking the coolest pair of Nikes and a suit type outfit that, as I said, only 1%ers can wear. And that was what John Liu, and I'm sure many of you would have seen that on the game, but great to see him, Dan Robertson and Paul and the guys. It was a heck of a lot of fun. And the game overall, Sean, was, I mean, listen, another strong performance for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, listen, we had enough time to talk leading into the game against Montreal about how fortunate the Jets were to escape from the road with 5 of 6 points. And Connor Hellebuck was a huge part of that. Connor Hellebuck was a big part of the game, obviously not allowing a goal in a 30-save shutout. But this was very much a strong team win and exactly what you wanted to see out of the Winnipeg Jets, playing a couple teams that certainly amongst the collective wisdom might not be up to the test they'll have on Tuesday, as well as some of the teams that they were able to grind points out on the road.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Hellebuck because it was at the end of the game. I was having a chuckle. The last game that the Jets played where Connor Hellebuck had the shutout, I actually didn't think that he was the first star of the game. It was just, it was that game against St. Louis and the team played, just such a good defensive style. I didn't think he was the best player in that game. And so I was saying to myself at that time in my head, it's okay for the goaltender not to be the first star of the game, even though he gets a shutout. And then that's what happened in the game that we were watching. And I actually do think Connor Hellebuck was still the best player on the ice. So I didn't think it should have happened in that situation, but I'm entirely okay with the goaltender not getting the first star of the game when they get the shutout. And you were not okay with it. And I just thought that was hilarious because I felt like you were kind of calling me out, even though I didn't say anything, but I'd had this conversation. I think it was Joey Slattery from CTV. But I was like, he wasn't the first star of the game. I know he got the shutout, but he wasn't the first star of the game. But you're one of those believers that if you put up the donut, you get the number one beside your name.
I'll be honest.
It was funny that it came up.
I'm certainly here for the arguments on it. What I will say, though, is, and this is strictly from a fan standpoint, if Hellebuck gets a shutout, it should just be a house rule that he's the number one star because nobody has better celebrations than Connor Hellebuyck after the game. And I'll say this, he didn't ride the stick or he didn't do the fishing pole celebration. However, and again, folks, you may have to go back to the Jets YouTube because there's a great picture of what he did coming out afterwards, holding his hands up and doing the, if you can see it, the V, which is the goalie celebration from Sega 94. And this, of course, was the retro reverse game. So that was, I think, a little nod to the greatest hockey game ever made. I'll have to ask Connor about that because I'm pretty darn sure that he did that perfectly. And if you saw the mix, that was an old Sega 94 goalie celebration that Hellebuyck did last night. And bottom line is, whether he was the first star or Josh Morrissey was the first star, both of them had great games and led the way for a Jet team that came up with another pretty strong full 60-minute effort, especially in that third period, ensuring that their stalwart goaltender got the shutout.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to give credit to the Chicago Blackhawks because we know everyone expected them to come into the season and maybe be the worst team in the NHL. They looked like that's what they were trying to do, and who knows, maybe that's exactly what their management group was trying to do. I covered Luke Richardson a little bit when Montreal Canadiens went to the Cup final, and he had to take over for Dom Ducharme when he was out with COVID. We know that Luke Richardson's a great coach, and it's amazing the way he's got his team going right now. Give him credit because that team battled. And I went on that little tangent just to say, we talked about the Jets coming off the road and not liking their game and probably escaping with some points, which I think that they did. And then you see them play the Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks, two teams that I think are probably going to start falling as the year goes on. And we'll look back at this and be like, well, so what? Overtime win against a Montreal Canadiens team that's not going to make the playoffs. And they beat the Chicago Blackhawks, who are probably in the process of, falling back towards the mean and falling below the playoff line. But both those teams came in with really, really honest efforts. And what I liked about the Jets is they're more skilled than those teams, clearly. I mean, give Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews their due. But, the mass amount of talent that the Jets have was going to show through in that game. I thought they handled that Chicago game right because at 5-on-5, it was a fairly even game. But, skill really shows through on special teams, and that's what we saw in that game. We saw the Jets, playing the right way at 5-on-5, not trying to get outside themselves, having confidence, that they were going to find their moments in the game, and that's what they did. They went in with the extra man, found the moments in the game, used the extra space, used their skill, made their power play look really, really good, which, I thought was another one of those things that can boost confidence for this Jets team because we know that their power play has been, a little iffy at times so far this year. I think they handled that game the right way because the Chicago Blackhawks, if they would have tried to open up and outskill them at 5-on-5, the honest game that you're seeing from that Chicago team could have ended up in them popping a couple back the other way, if you could get one behind Connor Hellebuyck on that night. And it could have been an entirely different game. And I go back to the game before that against the Montreal Canadiens. That was a game in which I thought the Jets had control of that game the entire time, except that Canadiens team can be a little bit opportunistic scoring as well, the way that the Winnipeg Jets are. That Suzuki goal is a perfect example of that. Again, I thought the Jets handled that the right way. They didn't panic. They didn't open things up. They didn't revert to just trying to, be opportunistic scorers. They stuck with the game plan against two teams that challenged that game plan with their effort. And I think that's a reason for Jets fans to be happy. I think it's a reason for Rick Bowness to be extremely happy that his message is being carried and held on to by his team.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And in a game like that one, Sean, that we saw where, we have, a full 60-minute effort, no goals coming in the other side, everyone's getting a chance to play, everyone's getting out there. I mean, this is the sort of the model that Bowness has said. We want to see the lines looking similar. We want to see them doing the same things. And as much as that was a strong game by the top two lines, the third line in particular, and that's been the first time we'd seen Adam Lowry centering Axel Jonsson-Fjällby and Saku Menelainen. I thought both of the Europeans made a big, big impact in that game, and that third line did not take a step back at all with those guys playing alongside Adam Lowry. And, of course, Lowry, once again, making things happen, not only at 5-on-5, but also shorthanded.
Yeah, you know what, on our Kenny and Rennie show, I'd been talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois and how he'd been playing, and how I just think, when you get a big, strong guy like that, you kind of, when they've got the speed that they've got, they kind of create a wake behind them, right? And it's an open space that players who know how to play off those big guys can move into and capitalize on opportunities. And I think that, Adam Lowry has taken his game to the next level where he's become that. Like, we know he's a big body. We know he's strong. We know he clears space. We know from how we see him on the penalty kill that he's got the speed to get out and get those breakaways and not get caught from behind. I thought, those two players that you're talking about, Menelainen and Jonsson Fjällby, did a good job of playing to the strengths of a guy who's been strong so far this year. And when you're younger players like they are, and I guess, Menelainen isn't that young, but he's a young NHLer, as is Jonsson Fjällby. I think that's the way you do it. You kind of take your cues from the guy who's making it work and showing that he's where he needs to be right now. I thought they did a great job of that, but I thought they contributed. You were talking all night about Jonsson Fjällby and just the speed that he was showing all over the place. I think you and I had this conversation. Players like him, he's clearly fast, but there can be a lot of really fast players who skate a lot to nowhere. And in the end, speed doesn't matter if you're not going to the right spot. I feel like Jonsson Fjällby, especially out there with Lowry, but as this season has worn on, I felt like he came in and I was thinking, is he going to be one of these players, these fast guys with the flowing hair who go here, 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 and never really get to where they're going because they're not going to the right spot? He looks like he's now applying that speed that he has and getting to the spots that he needs to be. I think it's as simple as him learning how to play off the other players on this team, but also learning, the system that he's expected to play in. I think he's taking his speed as a weapon and he's using it as a weapon right now. And I think that's, another way of talking about what you saw on that night.
It's hilarious that you mentioned that description of a player with a lot of speed in the hair. It reminded me of remember Ron Duguay when he was back in the NHL?
Oh, yeah.
I used to joke that Duguay would go out for a shift and he would just skate as fast as he could to one end and then as fast as he could to the other end. So he got the flow going, wasn't even paying attention to the puck, and then he'd get back on. It was more for vanity purposes for the longtime NHLer. Very different to this, very different for this group. But Menelainen and Fjällby have been, Jonsson Fjällby have been really good stories so far this season. And it's quite clear that they are earning the trust of the coach. And, Sean, this Ehlers injury, and we'll get to that in a minute, has created a spot up front where someone has gone up. Obviously, Mason Appleton has been that guy, but I think it's also given some opportunities for guys in that bottom six to show a little bit more. And to me, those players in particular have taken advantage of the opportunity. Although, speaking of opportunities, I thought Jansen Harkins acquitted himself quite well. You could tell he had a real jump from the time he had with the Manitoba Moose.
Yes.
And was looking to make the most of his time in the lineup. And, Sam Gagner as well. Gagner is such a versatile player. We've seen in limited time he can make an impact higher up in the lineup. But on a regular shift, I mean, if you've got a guy like Sam Gagner playing with the likes of David Gustafson and Jansen Harkins, Toninato, Appleton, one of the guys we just mentioned, is a very different looking fourth line. And it is a line that, as we've talked about for the last couple of weeks, I think has an incredible amount of trust from the coaching staff that just simply wasn't there in previous seasons.
Yeah, speaking of previous seasons, you want to take a look at this team and its bottom six and how it's operating right now, or maybe just the success that they're having and kind of question what role that plays in it. Think about what this team looked like in the bottom six last year. Like, Vesalainen was there and he was given every opportunity to succeed. And I just saw right from training camp, just a player that was never really capitalizing on those opportunities. And so what happens is he's doing that, and Harkins, I think, wasn't necessarily hitting the spots that they were hoping that he would hit. And so what you had last year in the bottom six was like trying this player here. Well, let's try this here. Maybe this will work. Maybe this will work. Maybe this will work. I think what we've seen, especially, and I think it's a good point you talk about Menelainen and Jonsson Fjällby, going from the fourth line to the third line and still succeeding in that spot there is right now. I don't think there's a wrong answer if you're Rick Bowness on who comes out of the lineup when Nick Ehlers finally finds his way there. It's like basically everyone is working everywhere. And to your point, Jansen Harkins, I thought, came up, and I thought he looked great. I thought he looked better than we'd seen him for most of last year. It was another thing. He was using his speed, but he was going to the right places. He was making things happen. Looked dangerous, but he didn't look like he was playing outside of himself. The effort looked like it was there at every single moment. What you've got right now in the bottom six is a competition of guys who are all know what their role is supposed to be, because you've got this coach that says, I want all the lines to look the same. So they know what it's supposed to look like. And they're kind of leading the charge for this team. Like the Menelainens and the Janssen Fialbis and even Gagne and those guys are, I think, in the coach's eyes, showing the top two lines what they're supposed to look like when they're not scoring goals. When you're not popping the puck in the back of the net, look like Axel Jonsson-Fjällby and look like Saku Menelainen. This is what we want you playing like. So I just think the bottom six right now is in a team that looked like it was searching for its identity on that road trip. They are setting the standard of what the identity of this team is supposed to look like. And it just creates this phenomenal situation where, again, there's no wrong answer on who comes into the lineup, who goes out of the lineup. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point you see, Jansen Harkins ends up in the lineup and a player like Menelainen or Jonsson-Fjällby ends up out. And I think if something like that happens, it's a good thing because, coming back into the lineup for Jansen Harkins was an opportunity for Rick Bowness to show the rest of the team that if you get demoted and you handle it properly and you do the right things, you're going to work your way back into an opportunity. That's an important thing on this team. And I think it's something that we've seen missing from the Jets for a number of years is that, we knew who was, I said this at the beginning, you and I had this conversation at camp. I knew in the Paul Maurice era, when you came to camp, you knew who was going to make the team. You knew who wasn't. There wasn't really a competition. We had names were written in with pen and 2 or 3 of them were written in with pencil. And even that pencil was scribbled in pretty hard. This is a situation right now where teams that are best have an internal competition. And there is a very healthy, because everyone respects each other and everyone is hoping for each other to succeed, but it's a very healthy competition. But no doubt it's a competition for guys to fight and stay in the lineup. And I think that's one of the things that has the Jets' bottom six being a big part of their success so far this year.
Sean Reynolds of Sportsnet and Kenny and Rennie with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Got to give a shout out to the freezer. His back. Ryan, $40 freezing. Ryan, thanks for becoming a supporter of Winnipeg Sports Talk. That is awesome and great to see you back and very active in the chat as always. Now, Jansen Harkins got an opportunity to play. So did Kyle Capobianco, and he'd sort of been a forgotten guy, Ren. I mean, he'd been a guy that we knew was on the roster. Yeah. He had been around, but we just had not heard or seen very much of him. And listen, for a guy making his first start with a new team, it was a workmanlike, solid effort, did not look out of place at all. That was a very interesting story, but when we're talking about the blue line, the guy that, got that first star, got the goal, was bebopping to his favorite goal song on the bench was Josh Morrissey. I mean, just thoughts on the blue line and in particular, Morrissey's performance and Capobianco's debut.
Okay, let's start with Capobianco. I know you and I were saying, you know what? He's having that kind of game that you want a guy who's just stepping into the lineup with the Jets for the first time. But when you haven't been playing for a while and you step into the lineup, unless you are so skilled that you can go out there and, pop a goal and assist or something like that or whatever and be one of those kind of players. I don't think Capobianco's that player, and most defensemen in the NHL aren't those kind of players. What you want from them is to not notice them. Because that means they're doing all the right things. They're making all the right plays. They're making hockey look boring and easy. And that's good if you're a defenseman, especially one who's, like a tentative NHLer. Usually if you're noticing a guy who's, a bubble NHLer or a fringe NHLer, it's for the wrong reasons. And that's what I saw. That's what you saw, I know, because we were having that conversation. We were talking about it. I don't know about your audience. I was surprised by our audience on Kenny and Rennie. There was a lot of people taking runs on him and suggesting that he was had a really bad game. It's not what I was seeing. I saw a guy who stepped in that if I'm a coach and I'm thinking, boy, if something falls apart this year and, a couple of guys get injured, that's a guy, based on what I saw from him there, I have no problem bringing into the lineup. And I'm very confident he's going to do just fine. So I thought for Capobianco, that was the exact kind of start that he needed with the Winnipeg Jets. I'm interested in seeing, how he could potentially build on that game. The interesting part about defensemen is usually when they get settled like that, a lot of times they're able to build, but a lot of times in their attempt to build, they actually take away from their game, and that's when the mistakes start coming in. I don't know which kind of player he would be, but he's piqued my interest. I want to see what else he has to offer. As for Josh Morrissey, I don't know that there has been, outside of the argument would be Connor Hellebuck, and I know that Adam Lowry has been really great. I think he's up this game. I don't think that there's been a better Winnipeg Jet this year than Josh Morrissey, as far as the idea of, leading by example, leading by your play, showing what you're capable of, the confidence that he's playing with right now. I think right now we're seeing the very best version of Josh Morrissey we've ever seen. And I would go as far as saying we're seeing maybe one version of him that I think people thought he was going to come into this league and be an offensive defenseman, because he was able to do that when he was in the WHL. And that's been an element of his game that I think we've been waiting for him to build, and maybe thought at this age that, it was never really going to come. I think we're starting to see the offensive capabilities of him. Boy, oh boy, he was doing some special stuff in practice here today that was just kind of wowing us. So you're seeing that element. You're seeing him, jump up and be one of the highest point producers on the team. But no one thought that he was going to be the defensive version of him that he became in the NHL. The question for me was always, now that he'd established himself as a very good defensive player, and he's got just such good, body positioning, and he wins puck battles with his body positioning, was he going to be able to do that and add the offensive part of his game? I'm really excited to see where Josh Morrissey ends up this year, because he's got the potential to be a fairly offensive defenseman while still being that guy who's making the right play every time, rarely makes mistakes. I reiterate it again. If I had a vote right now to say who was the Jets MVP through the top 10 games, it's a real hard decision for me between him and our goaltender.
Well, Connor has been, so brilliant, but that's what happens. That the nature of that position, when you stand out the way that he has, he will be there. But you're right. And considering what is on Josh Morrissey's shoulders, we can all debate whether he is a number one defenseman or, just a great solid guy in a 2-3 position. He's playing that role for the Winnipeg Jets right now, and he's helping them in both ends of the rink. And, getting a little bit more offense is huge. And that goes back, Brenny, to something that Rick Bowness had talked about, when we saw Nate Schmidt score, and of course, Josh Morrissey scoring. They wanted to get more out of the blue line and the defenders.
Yes.
And so far, that seems to be coming to fruition, led by 44.
Yeah, well, and Neil Pionk had that quick start to the year, and we saw that. And that's one of the things that we learned is those players talk about Rick Bowness giving them the green light to do that. And this is one of those things where you've got a coach who comes in and he says, listen, we take a look at the amount of points produced by the defense last year. It wasn't enough. We can't be a successful team if that's the level of contribution that we're getting from the defense. So he said he wanted more. And he said he wanted to give them the green light. And I think, that's kind of a mentality thing. It's like, you just go ahead and do what you got to do. He's trying to remove any mental blocks within the Winnipeg Jets defense between them and, being players who contribute offensively. But you can see that he's backed it up by the way he's coached this team, by the way he's built the systems. You can see there was one play. I forget which game it was, but Neil Pionk, Josh Morrissey jumps up into the play in the offensive zone, and he goes down, and it's one of those plays where it's like, well, there better be a forward who jumps back and covers for him. Well, not only, well, as soon as that forward jumps back and covers for him, Neil Pionk jumps into the play as well, and it's the pass across from Josh Morrissey over to Neil Pionk, I think, resulting in a goal. I think, if I'm correct, I think it was the first goal of the game against the Dallas Stars the last time they played, and I think the only goal of the game against the Dallas Stars. But you've got this play in which the defense are jumping into the play in the offensive zone so fast and so rapidly and in such high numbers that the forwards can't possibly spell them off. But that's what the coaches are asking for from them, and that's what they're allowing for in this system. So I do think there's going to be an element here of Josh Morrissey's game. We're seeing what Josh Morrissey's game looks like under the tutelage of Rick Bowness. It's been a really good fit so far, and I'm excited to see what it looks like as the year goes on.
Sean Reynolds of Sportsnet's with us. Rennie, hang tight because I do want to get to practice with you in this upcoming game against Dallas. Just before we do that, I got to give a big thanks to our friends at Consolidated Supply. Your first choice for all things golf, for lawn and garden to golf. Consolidated Supply has the highest quality products and exceptional customer service, irrigation, turf, golf carts, and more. But there's so much more. Landscape projects at your home or property. Consolidated Supply has so much. We had mentioned some of the artificial turf. You want to get that dream putting green in the backyard or somewhere on the property. They can help you with that, as well as outdoor kitchens, hot tubs, and more for the backyard of your dreams. Pop down and see them. They're at 1395 Niagara Road East. But you can also find out more on everything Consolidated Supply has, along with small engine parts, over online at their new relaunched website at cte.ca. Hey, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products, you need to pop by and see our friends at one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores or online at myvita.ca. Guys, November is considered Men's Health Month, and choosing the right natural products are key. Vita Health carries everything you need to help relieve prostate issues, reduce stress, and support mental focus from Canadian brands like Prairie Naturals, who donate a portion of the sales to the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. And if you can't make it down to one of the stores, visit their new fully shoppable website to browse, buy online, schedule delivery, or in-store pickup. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives, 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. Well, we knew it was coming, gang. We knew that the snow would eventually come. We haven't had too much right now, but it is not too late to finish up those final tasks on your winterization list. And don't forget about your garage door. Wallace & Wallace wants to remind you to make sure you get that washer hose down to brighten up the curb appeal, but also protect the life of your door. You're going to need to lubricate your rollers and hinges with a high-quality lithium or silicone-based grease. But if you want to leave it to the experts, give Wallace & Wallace a call and take advantage of their winter maintenance program. It's their version of a medical checkup for your door. The technicians will poke and prod their way through a 21-point checklist, making sure your door is ready for the upcoming winter ahead. To book your service call, give them a buzz now, 452-2700, or go online to wallacedoors.com. All right, Sean Reynolds hanging out with us live from the rink. And Sean, as you mentioned, the Dallas Stars are on the ice right now. Looking forward to a big battle for first place tomorrow night. Who could have seen that coming this early into the season? But before we get to the Stars, fill us in on practice today. Seemed like most of the same lines we saw going on Saturday afternoon were back intact. Capobianco, though, going in and out. I mean, well, fill us in on what you saw and then what Bones had to say afterwards as his team gets ready for a huge game at home against the team ahead of them in the Central standings.
Well, it's interesting. I love watching practice because I love trying to pick up on the cues, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I like, a loud practice is a good practice. And I think there was a lot of times last year when the Jets were practicing that we talk about it just being a mausoleum in here, right? And it's interesting to watch this team, I would argue, because sometimes the team can be really loud, and it's not necessarily the best thing if they're kind of all over the place. The one hallmark of this team that's trying to find consistency, I find is that their practices are starting to look very consistent, and that they're loud, but they're focused, right? Like there's a time for kind of giving it to each other and having fun. And you can see the guys are all out there having fun. They're still, John with each other. And, if Blake Wheeler gets the puck and he jams it past Connor Hellebuyck, he's still always letting Connor Hellebuyck hear it, right? But there's a focus to these practices that seems to stand out to me this year. I thought it was interesting. I thought that was the point that Rick Bowness made afterwards. He talked about the last time they played this Stars team, that they weren't up to speed. They weren't fast enough. They got left behind in that game. And so today's practice looked like what the Jets should be looking like tomorrow, is a high-paced, fast practice. When they seemed to be slowing down, Rick Bowness was yelling a lot. He was smashing his stick on the ice. He's got a lot of vitality. If anyone thinks that at 67 years old he's slowing down, they got another thing coming. He seems to have more energy than anyone on the ice, but he's also very demanding of what he wants out there. And as he searches for consistency, he is pushing to ensure that that consistency includes being up to speed and doing everything fast like they'll need to in this game here. So I mean, that's kind of what stood out to me. Like you said, there's not a lot changing personnel wise. It's just going to be interesting to see where these Jets are, because they did not look like they were in the league of the Dallas Stars the last time they played. And yet here they are, just 1 point behind them. They beat them tomorrow, and they grab a share of that first place lead. So I'm very interested to see. We know that the Jets have made progress on their game. It's going to be good to see the Dallas Stars as the yardstick of what progress has been made.
Sean, it's funny you mentioned that game earlier this season against the Stars, because that was a game that I think we look back at, amongst the highs and lows of this season, as kind of more towards the bottom than more towards the top. But
right,
I remember rewatching that game afterwards, and I love the way the team came out, and I thought they played a really good first 10 minutes of the game. What was unfortunate for the visitors was that the Dallas Stars cranked up their level of play, and for about a 25-minute period through the second half of the first period until well into the second, the Dallas Stars absolutely owned the game. They owned the puck, and the Winnipeg Jets did not have many answers. And, at that point, they had a big lead. The third period was, I think, what you might want to call score effects. Dallas was very comfortably ahead and it was never in doubt. The fact that they've played each other so far, and of course, this was supposed to be Rick Bowness's homecoming to Dallas. He wasn't on the bench. But the fact that they have that game, they have that video, and they have those memories, it sets up a fascinating rematch tomorrow night on home ice with the Winnipeg Jets with the last change. Just your thoughts on this game and what sort of a test it is for Winnipeg. We knew that they should and did beat Montreal and Chicago. I think everyone knew that the level of difficulty was going to be going up throughout this homestand. And what a matchup we've got tomorrow night, and another great test for a team that has passed a few recently.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. We know that the Colorado Avalanche are coming, so they'll end up there. And I think from what I'm seeing so far, and so we know we're only 10 games in, it's pretty easy to say that. But I do think that these three teams, the Jets, the Dallas Stars, and the Colorado Avalanche, are kind of the teams that, need to be eyeing each other up, expecting to see each other toward. This is an important game. I also think it's a really important game because I think there's a lot of similarities between the Dallas Stars and the Winnipeg Jets, in that the Dallas Stars were a Rick Bowness coach team that kind of seemed to have the defensive side of their game down. What they seemed to need to be able to add over the years was a little bit more of that offensive punch, right? And so in comes Pete DeBoer. I didn't think it was going to work. I went on the record saying I didn't think it was a good hire for this team. And so far it looks like it's wrong to me. It looks like what's happened is they've taken the kind of foundation that Rick Bowness built defensively with this team and have added that scoring ability that Pete DeBoer has usually been able to find, was able to find for all those years with the San Jose Sharks. And, maybe not as much. I know things were kind of a disaster in Vegas, but he's added in that element to make them a far more capable team, while the Jets are kind of on the other side of things. They had the offense built in, and now Rick Bowness is coming in here to give them that foundation that he gave this Dallas Stars team. So I think it's important, if you're the Winnipeg Jets, to find a way to play this team, because I wouldn't be surprised at all to see these two teams meeting each other in the playoffs, if not the first round of the playoffs, the way that the everything falls. And so they need to find ways to figure this team out and be successful against them, is my take on this. Because they're both very similar teams. They're both capable offensively. They're both big, strong teams. They both have great goaltending. I think Jake Ottinger is one of the best goalies in the league, and I think he was a surprise for a lot of people last year that I personally saw coming at the beginning of the year, and I remember warning people about this guy on Twitter early. So I think there's a ton of similarities against these teams, between these teams, because they're in the same division. I think that this is one of these games that maybe I'm overblowing this, but I think the Dallas Stars are a team that the Jets have to pay attention to far more than almost any other team in the NHL. So I know, maybe you're saying it to kind of like build up the hype of the match between these two teams. I don't think it's hype. I think it's important that the Jets show up against this team, learn how to play against this team, and take those lessons into the playoffs, because I'm not going to be surprised one bit to see these teams play each other in the playoffs.
Such a huge game, and the way Connor Hellebuyck is rolling, I don't think there's any doubt that it'll be 37 and then at net tomorrow night. And then it's interesting, Sean, you got 3 days off and then back-to-backs on the weekend out west, in Calgary on Saturday and against the upstart Seattle Kraken on Sunday, who, if you look at the standings right now, are in second place in the Pacific Division ahead of those Calgary Flames. Should we expect Riddick, Big Save Dave, to probably get the Saturday night start in the second end of the back-to-backs, where often the backup goalie is thrown in and see what he can do?
Yeah, I wonder. To me, I think that we'll see him against Seattle. I think you know what?
Revenge game narrative against his old team, the Flames.
Yeah, okay, I can tell you something. Sorry, it's not anything I can say out loud. I think David Riddick has revenge on his mind this season. I don't think it's against the Calgary Flames. That's over. But there are storylines there. He's got things that he needs to prove. I just don't think that the Calgary Flames are the team that he's thinking about when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I expect to see him against Seattle, just because Connor Hellebuyck is doing what he's doing. I don't think you want to keep Connor Hellebuyck out of the net for too long, especially the way he's playing. So I expect to see him against Calgary, and I do think that's the team. Again, if we're talking about the idea of the Jets making the playoffs and teams they could run into, Calgary is probably more likely the team that you would think you had to figure out at that time. So you want to have your best goalie in and try and see what it's going to look like if you play that team going forward. That would be my take on it. You're right. Upstart Seattle Kraken. I was talking about teams that I thought were off-season winners. I thought that they were one of the top 3 off-season winners, the players that they added. And, Bjorkstrom, I think, is a great player that they added. They kind of raided a team that was in a little bit of salary cap trouble with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then, who's the other player? He's Nick Ehlers' buddy.
Burakovsky?
Burakovsky, I think, is a great player. That was a phenomenal pickup for them. They had a great offseason, and I take a look at players like Yanni Gourde. Yanni Gourde is a player that I think that there's not a team in the NHL that wouldn't benefit from Yanni Gourde being on their team. They've got a pretty good defense going on there. They've got the capability to not be one of these teams that falls off. They could be a hard team to play against for a while. I wouldn't be surprised to see them sneak into the playoffs. We saw the Jets just come off 2 games against teams I don't expect to see in the playoffs, who played a real hard grinding style and made it a challenge. These two, it's a step up now. We're going to go see what Rick Bowness's blueprint looks like, to see if they can pull the consistency out of this team for another 2 games. They're going to do it against teams that I think are a step up from the last 2 that they played. So I'm excited to see this weekend, never mind what we're going to see tomorrow night against the Dallas Stars.
You know what? And while the Seattle Kraken have been sort of a good story over the first little bit, I've got to ask you about the St. Louis Blues. 2 weeks ago, We were talking here in Winnipeg about the last undefeated team in the NHL. Now, granted, they had only played 3 games, but they just come off shutting out the Edmonton Oilers in Edmonton. They come here, the Jets play their most complete game of the season. Did the Jets break the St. Louis Blues? 6 straight regulation losses right now, and it is insane, Sean. You're looking at, now again, they've only played 9 games, but there they are with 6 points. They're 3 points back of the Arizona Coyotes at the basement of the Central Division. And, even with that start 3-0, I mean, you go 2 or 3 weeks without winning a game. That literally forces you to play at a much higher level the rest of the way if you're going to be a playoff team. And I'm confounded by what's happened with St. Louis since they came here to Winnipeg.
Yeah, so I was talking about the Seattle Kraken having a good offseason. Another one of the teams that I thought was top 3 and having a good offseason was the Detroit Red Wings. And one of the reasons for that was them picking up David Perron. So I thought, and I know that they had money trouble, I know that they had to make a move. I thought the St. Louis Blues losing David Perron was big, because David Perron is that guy that quietly everywhere he goes just contributes and is consistent, and you're going to get your points from him offensively, and you get that compete and all that kind of stuff. And while I do think the St. Louis Blues have it in them, and you bring up a good point. Like, I do expect them to correct themselves a little bit, but boy, oh boy, if you keep falling like this, you put yourself in a situation where you turn, a marathon into a sprint for the rest of the season, and that can be problematic. But, they had young guys like Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, who really picked up a lot of the slack on that team last year. But I thought that moving on from Perron put an extra layer of pressure on young players to carry the offense on a team that it probably finds it hard to create offense. So the problem I see them having there is there's pressure on those players, and they overcame that pressure with the team game for the first little while, but those players haven't woke up, and now it just seems like it's hard to win every night because scoring goals is hard. And there's some young guys who are in a slump. And this is where I think a guy like David Perron would have been paying dividends, because he just would go out and get it done consistently and carry the weight until those other guys woke up. I think those guys are struggling. They're still young enough that they're squeezing the stick, and there's no one there to carry the weight until they wake up. And so it's going to be a matter of how quickly they wake up, how quickly they figure it out. But you're right, they are a confounding team. But that is what I see being the issue with them. And to your point, if they don't wake up soon, it's going to be over before it starts. And that would be good news for teams like the Winnipeg Jets, the Dallas Stars, and the Colorado Avalanche, because we saw from St. Louis last year against Colorado, they maybe came closest to knocking them out of the playoffs last year. That's a dangerous team that you don't want to play if you get in the playoffs. So I'm sure the Central Division Blues not waking up and dropping themselves out of playoff contention if they can't wake up.
Hey, speaking of wake up, I imagine that's come out of Daryl Sutter's mouth a few times with his Calgary Flames. 5-4-1 right now. They've lost 4 in a row. And a couple of the games, blowing leads in the third period, not showing up for others. That Saturday night game on Hockey Night in Canada is going to be an interesting one when the Jets go into Calgary, and they will be rested. They'll have 3 days to get ready for that game. But as great of a job as Brad Treliving did in the offseason dealing with what was thrown at them, seems like this is still very much a work in progress for Daryl Sutter's squad.
Yeah, and I'll say this, advantage Winnipeg Jets right now, because I'm taking a look at the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm not, listen, I know, people tell me to settle down, and they should tell me to settle down. We've seen the Jets pull off the blueprint expected from them probably 3 times this year, and 2 games in a row, but again, two games in a row against teams that are below the playoff line, or who I expect to end up below the playoff line. But to me, what I see is a Jets team that has an understanding of what its blueprint is. They're starting to get to it a little bit more often lately. And what I see when I watch the Calgary Flames play is a team that for whatever reason, doesn't seem to understand or know its identity right now. And that's the funny part about it, is when they came in, in the preseason, I was talking to their defenseman Stone, and he was saying, we get it. We know what our identity is. We can play our identity until guys like Uyghur and Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri kind of find a way to fit into that identity. Well, that's not what we've seen. I think we've seen the opposite of that. I think we've seen, when you take parts of the nucleus out that you had with Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau, and then you replace that with a different nucleus. I think what we're learning in Calgary right now is when you take very central parts of the nucleus out and replace it, that the identity that you had built up is not, it can be a victim of that. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, because Nazem Kadri is trying to lead the way, and his way of leading may be different than what this team is used to. And Huberdeau, to me, looks lost right now. I'm a massive, massive believer that Jonathan Huberdeau is one of the most skilled players in the league and probably the best passer in the league. And he looks like he doesn't know where to go and who to pass to right now. And if he's replacing your Johnny Gaudreau or your Tkachuk, that is a lot of offense that is not being replaced at this moment. So I think, I think that the Calgary Flames weren't expecting to have an identity crisis, because they thought with their coach and with the surrounding players that identity would be in place. But I think the idea of moving out the very central parts of this team is challenging the identity of this team, and it's trying to figure it out.
Hey, Sean, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. Hey, just quickly, plug, are the rumors on the streets true? Are Kenny and Rennie both going to be boots on the ground at Regina at the Grey Cup?
Those rumors are not true. Kenny will be there. I've got a Hockey Night in Canada game on the Saturday, and then I've got a Monday night hockey the very next day. There's just not enough time for me to get out to Regina and back in. So I will not be there, but Ken, who loves to be on the road and loves to check the local cuisine and enjoy everything a city has to offer, will be enjoying whatever Regina has to offer for him, no doubt about it.
I would have loved to have seen the Kenny and Rennie show at Grey Cup. That would have been something to see. Great episodes on the weekend, my friend. We'll look forward to an exciting one tomorrow at the rink, and a great post-game show with you and Ken on the YouTube channel, folks. Make sure, if you're watching us on YouTube now and you haven't already gone over to Kenny and Rennie, give them a sub, and make sure you check out all the great post-game content that the boys are cranking out all year long. Thanks for doing this, dude, and great seeing you on Saturday.
Anytime, Huss. I had a blast.
Good stuff. There's Sean Reynolds, and of course, give him a follow on Twitter as well at SN Sean Reynolds. All right, Hammer's coming up. We will talk some more Jets with him, and I can't wait to hear his thoughts on the Canadian Football League as we get ready for the West Final coming up on Sunday. But let's get to our why not question of the day. And I'll be hitting this with Jeff. But what are your thoughts on the threat of the British Columbia Lions to the Bombers on Saturday? Give me your confidence level, Bomber fans, as Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions come to Winnipeg on the 13th. And I'll give you a little tease. I will have full details on this tomorrow, but our friends at Not AutoCorp going to be giving away some tickets for the West Final. I'll let you know where to go on their social pages to make a comment, enter to win, and we'll let you know who is going to the West Final, courtesy of the gang over at Not AutoCorp, coming up on Thursday's program heading into the weekend. Of course, Not's ready for winter. Are you? Listen, you may be thinking about a new vehicle, and if you're doing that, now is a great time to head down and talk to the experts at Not. Check out what's on the lot, or let them know what you're looking for, and they can source it, find it, and get you into it at the best possible price. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Not team? And why not get safe winter tires now and pay later? If you don't have your winter tires on, what are you waiting for? It's just about that time. And Not AutoCorp at the service lab has winter tire specials and an MPI payment plan if you don't have the cash right now to make that payment. It's all there waiting for you at Not AutoCorp, Waverly and McGilvery. And be sure to check them out online with everything going on at Not, online at not.ca. Speaking of new releases, we've got some new stuff coming out with their friends at New Era and Royal Sports, and I think we'll be able to drop those tomorrow on the program, at least part of the order, so make sure to join us there. Royal Sports, not only a great sponsor of ours since day one, but the official headquarters for all Winnipeg team fanwear. And just in time for that West Final, new Bomber toques, scarves, and more for those of you that want to be repping the blue and gold, but also want to stay warm and what will probably be a relatively chilly afternoon coming up on Sunday, at IG Field. Tons of new Jets gear as well. The retro reverses, which looked amazing on the weekend, are going to be on shelves in the next few days. So whether it's Bomber gear, Jets gear, your favorite NFL team, Canada gear for the upcoming World Cup, Royal Sports has it all. And if you've been involved in hockey, you probably know already, 40 years in the business, Royal Sports, the undisputed hockey superstore with the best selection of equipment, sticks, skates, and more, right down to expert gate sharpening. It's all there at Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. And as I mentioned to Sean, I got to give a big shout out to Andrew and the guys at F Apparel, because I got the new suit on. I didn't have a ticket for the game. I said, you know what, Saturday afternoon, we're going to hang in the press box with the gang. And I got to give F a big thank you, because got a lot of nice comments. A lot of people hadn't been used to seeing me in a suit for many, many years after wearing one every single day for about 15 years in that building and the previous building. But it was a heck of a lot of fun. Guys, if you are looking to step up your wardrobe, F Apparel is the spot for men's clothing, right up to custom suits, beginning at just $400. And with wedding season coming up next year, guys, if you are planning a wedding right now and you haven't already, talk to the experts at the gang down at F Apparel, because if your wedding party gets booked and measured up by the end of November, everyone in your wedding party will get a free shirt, and everyone will get 10% off, a savings of up to $130 per person. Find out more, 190 Smith Street downtown, or make an appointment, or hit them up online at EPHapparel.com. All right, continuing on with our Monday extravaganza, let's welcome in Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Lots to cover coming out of the weekend. Hammer, what's up? How was your weekend?
My weekend was pretty solid. Actually, solid would not be the word. I'm confusing that with the previous weekend when I was in Vegas and Arizona and stuff. This weekend, I worked seemingly endlessly on this Zach Collaros feature that I'm going to be producing for next weekend. I mentioned on your show a couple weeks ago I headed down to Steubenville, Ohio, where Zach's from. But so been on that. But I will say this, Huss. I mean, had I known that I was following up, Sean Reynolds, I'm okay with that as far as takes go. But I would have done my makeup a little bit better had that been the case. And if you want to get the rumor mill going, I actually introduced him to my hairstylist, so we share the same cutter.
Wow. Well, I mean, Rennie's hair usually looks good, as does yours. So, I mean, it's a pretty nice endorsement. By the way, the freezer's making it rain in the chat today. Ryan, thanks for the super chat. Says, I'm not worried about the Lions at all. Rourke was limping last game and didn't look great at the end of the game. I call a 35-18 Bombers victory. I want to see the Bombers versus Argos to take on Harris. Let's go Bombers and Jets. Freezer, great stuff. And thanks very much for the very kind super chat. I actually had an amazing weekend as well. Fun yesterday watching the football, Saturday watching the games in the World Series at night. I do have to quickly say, Hammer, and this will kind of tie into the CFL talk. Friday night, I got together with a few of the guys, and we went to the Regent Casino and saw Took, our former WST guest, Brent Fitz, absolute beauty. He and his band
One of my
playing a bunch
favorites,
of oh my God, he's such a great dude. And man, did they put on a great show. I believe rumors are about that if you are at Grey Cup, they will be playing Ryderville on Saturday night. That will certainly be the place to be. Anyways, we hit the tables for a bit. We had some money. We decided, you know what? Let's do an impromptu bar tour of Deep Transcona. And we don't get out there very often. And,
is this safe
I gotta
for
tell
work?
you
got to give a warning, safe for work here?
No, it was so much fun. And it was such a contrast, because every time on Friday night, I would fire up my Twitter when I just take a quick look. And it's just a whole bunch of people spending their Friday night bitching about the CFL, the Grey Cup halftime show. And then we roll out to a couple of the bars in Transcona. Let me tell you something. There was no one out there that was too worried about the Grey Cup halftime show. Those people were living, if you know what I'm saying. We had the absolute best
sure they weren't
time.
feeling
Saw
anything.
a great bunch of people out there. So anyways, I think a lot of stuff is made. I guess my point is that if you were spending your Friday night mad online about the CFL Grey Cup halftime show, it might be time to reevaluate the priorities. That is just my take. That being said, we can talk about the Grey Cup in a minute, and I want to talk some hockey with you, but I mean, you're sort of our go-to guy for all things CFL. What did you think about the two big games yesterday? Maybe we'll start with the East, because I think the West is going to dominate our conversations. Pretty nice performance by the Montreal Alouettes, who played one of their best games in the last couple months when they needed it the most. And they're going to be going to Toronto to take on the Argos with, as Ryan Friesen just said, Andrew Harris back at practice, seemingly ready to play again.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was a lot of people were trending towards the away teams. You know, Hamilton had come on late in the season. We saw them, handle the Bombers more than anybody had this season. So I think a lot of people were riding that high off the Ticats. Same story with Calgary. We'll get into that after. But with that particular game with Hamilton and Montreal, I think it really just came down to Montreal is a really good team at home. I mean, that's, their record doesn't necessarily reflect that this season. It certainly has in previous years, even for down years. I mean, they hadn't made the playoffs or won a playoff game in a handful of those years. So, I thought Trevor Harris looked really good. I thought they were coming out guns blazing, obviously got on the scoreboard early, put Hamilton into a hole. And, the thing about the Ticats this season, all season really, from their horrible start to, their pretty solid finish to the regular season, was the story of Dane Evans. And Dane Evans reverted back to the old Dane Evans in costly turnovers and ineffective play and not putting drives together. So that kind of spelled the story for me. And then, you take Dane Evans out, it's a little bit more of a game. But credit to the Alouettes. I think, they got a solid defense. Their offense, they got, you look at a guy like Eugene Lewis. I mean, he's a guy that, he's the East representative of the, for most outstanding player. He had a monster game. They have weapons on that team. So I don't think they're going to be, treated lightly by the Toronto Argonauts here, but the same story. I think Toronto's a really good team at home too. And so it really just speaks to the importance of earning those home playoff games, whether that be the semifinal game or of course the finals, if you finish atop the standings in your respective division. And it goes a long way. There's any given Sunday, anyone can beat anybody, but you tip the scale towards yourself when you're in that home playoff game.
So then we move on to the West. And this was the main event. I was looking forward to this game all weekend long. I appreciated the NFL only putting 2 late games on. So no matter where you were, the CFL was getting its rightful place on some of the screens. And man, the BC Lions did it. And this was a game that really was dominated and won by the BC defense, which I think maybe surprised some people. What were your takeaways from both the performance of the Lions and how Nathan Rourke looked, and what didn't happen for the Calgary Stampeders, who I think many people thought were going to go in there and book a trip to Winnipeg?
Well, that's it. I think because Calgary had a good end of the season, you want to be peaking, if you will, heading into the games that truly matter, and that was the case for the Stampeders. So they got a lot of love heading into the playoffs. But again, same story. I mean, this is a BC team that I don't know if I was surprised by the defensive effort. The defense has been arguably one of the better units in the CFL. They did dip, for a few weeks there, for a handful of weeks rather, after the injury to Nathan Rourke. So, but they are a good unit for sure. As for Nathan Rourke, I mean, he looked good for the most part. He's still limping. I mean, a big part of his game is mobility, right? I mean, he's obviously an accurate thrower. He's a deadly thrower. I think it took him a bit of time, and that was the benefit of getting him, some live reps in the final regular season game, which should just get some of that timing on, even against the Bombers. I mean, there was a couple throws where he just was a little bit off. He didn't look that way, very much against the Stampeders. And, but I also think there's a noticeable limp there. There's some other factors that head into this weekend too. I mean, he was in the friendly confines of BC Place where, they have a roof. It's protected from the elements. It's not going to be anything like IG Field. You're playing in front of 30,000 in this case, fans, home fans. in BC, it's going to be flipped over to Winnipeg. We've seen, the self-proclaimed and certainly warranted loudest fans in the CFL here in Winnipeg. It's taken on a new level this season, I'd argue, and that's going to play a major factor to Nathan Rourke, not being able to communicate as easily as he would be at home, and then factor in that Bombers defense is a great group. They get a lot of pressure. It's going to be a bigger challenge, and then factor in the cold. I mean, no one wants to play in the cold. Nobody likes playing in snow or frigid temperatures. That being said, you have to see BC as a disadvantage here. I mean, whether there were guys that played in cold weather in college or have experience playing in cold games, the fact of the matter is they're conditioned to balmy weather. I mean, they live in Vancouver. It's no secret it's beautiful there, even over the winter for the most part. And again, if you play in an indoor stadium, it's going to be a stark difference when you travel to Winnipeg. So all those things considered, I think BC played a great game against a good Calgary team, but I think they're going to have their hands full this weekend against what we know to be a very good Bombers team too.
Well, and I'm with you on that. And I mean, all week long we were talking about this game. Listen, I thought it would be close. I think I was picking BC to win, maybe out of my Bomber fandom, because to be honest, given the situation, I thought Calgary, with them being a team that plays outdoors, the snow they've already had, I thought and the running game, when it comes down to it, the running game particularly, posed the biggest threat to the Bombers, because I'm with you. I think it's just going to be so different from what BC normally has. And what's interesting, Hammer, is that we talked a lot about those final two games at the end of the season, the home and home between the Bombers and Lions. I mean, they did play the final game of the year here just a couple weeks ago, but that was during record high temperatures. It was beautiful. It was nothing close to what it's going to be coming up on Sunday afternoon as I pull up Environment Canada, looking for a daytime high of -9 degrees. So this probably won't be as cold as last year in December against the Riders, and I think most fans will take that, but there is going to be the elements, and there is going to be a visiting crowd unlike anything that Nathan Rourke's had to deal with so far this season.
Absolutely. And I mean, just to tie, one more comment, as you mentioned, I get that Calgary was playing indoors, but them abandoning the run game as they did on Sunday, I thought that was what shot them in the foot, other than, some costly turnovers and, two failed.
Why in the world do you think they would have done that? I mean, like going away from your strength in a game. I mean, is it maybe that they just thought the entire BC challenge would be, we got to stop the run and, we'll take advantage of that, regardless of how they did it. It didn't work, and I don't think it put them in the best situation for them to show their best in this game and give them the best chance to win.
Well, talking to people who know the X's and O's and schemes significantly better than I do, from what I understand is that the way that the BC defense played, and the way you always kind of play, against what you think is an accurate quarterback like Jake Maier, is to force him to throw the ball. So you rush less, you pull more guys back, and that allows you to kind of swallow up the run game and focus on that, and force a guy who is a good player and is an accurate player, but doesn't take that element out of the game, make them one dimensional, and clearly they were successful in that. But when you have they sat Peyton Logan, who's had a great season, for Mills and Kadeem Carey, who is by far the best running back in the CFL. So certainly an eyebrow raiser for why they wouldn't lean on that and continue with that, especially given the fact that you end up taking Jake Maier out, putting Bo Levi Mitchell in, which is really nice for the storylines. I thought that he padded his stats there on a prevent defense for the BC Lions, and now he's the second coming of Jesus in Saskatchewan. So we'll see how that plays out this offseason. But yeah, certainly some curious ideas with Calgary. But as far as Winnipeg, I mean, like I said, this has been it's been a wild IG field for the last couple seasons. Of course, COVID limited that craziness with how many people could get in, but the Bombers have obviously been the class of the league for years, and nobody, fan bases like nothing more than winning. And so you look at what we've seen this season, and it's taken to a whole new level. There's been times where, we're going to have the glass shut, obviously, in the press box, but when it's been open, I mean, there are many times, and I've said it on this show, where I listen to the TSN, live stream on my computer, and I can usually hear, the plays, pretty clearly. not this year. This year it's been, it's been crazy, and fans have certainly done their job and shown up and really cheered on a really good Bombers team. So I'm expecting it to be, I don't know if they could take it to a whole new level. I'm certainly not going to rule them out of it, but they're definitely going to play a key factor in this game, through communication from Nathan Rourke and the Lions office, and just to get the blood going for Winnipeg. This is a team that is battle tested, and they have a ton of confidence in themselves, and they will play to the final whistle. They always believe they're going to win. That just is added to it when you have a fan base as loud and as passionate as Winnipeg has been this season, and it's certainly going to be an advantage for the Bombers.
You know what? I was just talking about this with Dusty on the Lock Shop before we fired up this today. I'm not sure. Have you seen a line yet for this West Final?
I haven't been poking around. No, I've been too busy. But
okay, what do you think if you were going to set the line? What do you think it will be?
I think the Bombers would probably be -3.5.
-3.5. I went with 4.5.
Okay,
but I do think that is sort of. I think that's sort of in the neighborhood. I don't think we're going to see a 6 or a 6.5 hung up for this game.
No, I don't think so.
Just because of how good BC has been. Although I think I sort of really like the Bombers situation. Of course, the Bombers have been practicing throughout this week, getting ready for their next opponent. Ed Tait's going to join us a little bit later on that. Quick comment on Andrew Harris returning. What does that do for the Argos and the potential of a Toronto-Winnipeg Grey Cup with Andrew Harris going up against his old team? I mean, it almost seems like it's in the cards right now, Jeff.
Well, I've been writing for weeks in my weekly CFL rundown column that I've been hearing whispers about Andrew starting to work out, starting to, focus, on getting back. I mean, I think, when he underwent surgery for that torn pectoral muscle and the Argonauts said he was out for the season, I thought that probably would be enough. Obviously, at 35 years old, getting up there in age and having, a couple injury riddled seasons the last few years, that it would be a tough go for him to come back. But I also told a lot of people who have, asked me about it. If there's one thing with Andrew Harris, you don't want to bet against him for a return. I mean, this is a guy who clearly wanted to come back to Winnipeg, wanted to extend his career, not just because he loves playing the game, but he didn't like how his 2021 season went. I mean, of course, it was great for getting the back-to-back Grey Cups, but personally, individually for him, he didn't want to be limited to half the season being out on injuries, and that's not the way he wanted to go out. So you take that logic into this season, and he's out a handful of games into the year. That's another reason why he would want to come back. So I think it'd be absolutely fascinating. There's a really good chance that Toronto will punch their ticket to the Grey Cup. As I mentioned before, they're a good team at home. It's interesting because I believe Andrew will be playing this Sunday. So, we'll see what the wear and tear is on him and how many miles he has left. I mean, I'm hearing he's healthy, that he's feeling good, but again, age catches up to you, and the way that he performs and the way that he runs, and I doubt they're going to limit his workload on a must-win game. But certainly, if he can get through that one, and the Argos can get a victory over Montreal, what a storyline! Because I mean, that's going to be just liquid gold, for writing those stories. Because Andrew's a great quote. He certainly has he will not be shy to share his desire for wanting to give it back to a team that ultimately let him go. And I'll be fascinated to see what the Bombers' response is. Either way, it certainly sets up for what is always a great week, and even juicier one.
No doubt about it. We'll have much more on the Bombers and Lions, as well as the Ticats and Argos, or Ticats, the Toronto Argos and the Montreal Alouettes, as we get closer to the finals weekend in the Canadian Football League. And of course, the following weekend's Grey Cup. Jeff Hamilton's with us from the Winnipeg Free Press. I wanted to touch on the Jets with you quickly, but before we do that, Hammer, I don't even know how to describe this. The level of embarrassment that the Boston Bruins organization has gone through over the course of the last, a 48-hour stint that Mitchell Miller was part of their club. And I know at the start, people saying, oh, it's hockey culture, hockey. Listen, this is really embarrassing for the National Hockey League. Gary Bettman himself said, oh, he's not playing in the league anytime soon. He is not cleared to play in the league. And just the level of incompetence or hubris from a Boston Bruins organization that's had this great start has put, a real black mark on them. And of course, 24 or 48 hours later from making this big announcement, they're done. Like, how are you following all this, and what was your reaction initially up until Boston walking away from a guy they signed 2 days ago?
Well, I try to resist, going on Twitter and sharing my, my opinions, but these ones are just too hard to pass up. I just, right from the beginning, I think it was a clear fumble, if you will, from the Boston Bruins and claiming that, just everything from why they brought him on, focusing on what they thought was an isolated incident. I mean, look, I get it happened when he was 14 years old, but, there needs to be some efforts made to repair the damage that you did, to truly convince people that you've moved on. And I'm not looking to hold anybody to what they did as a teenager, but I think in this situation, playing in the National Hockey League is a privilege. It's not a right. And so, when you looked at the lack of investigation that ultimately turned out that the Bruins didn't do and claim that they did, if you look at Mitchell's apology, it doesn't talk about any element of racism. It doesn't talk about, how many times do you need to mention that you were 14 years old? Or, you know what I mean? Like, that to me just seems so insincere, that it was almost laughable. And then for the whole thing to play out the way it did, from, his agent, who is black, coming out and, standing behind him and using all these things, all these initiatives and programs that he helped with, several of which, almost all of which, were mandated from the courts, as masked as some kind of, long list of volunteer work. I just, to ultimately Cam Neely coming out, and putting kind of a final stamp on it all. Like, even that statement, sounded hollow and fell short. I mean, this whole idea that, and the crazy part about that too, in that final statement was, how many eyeballs look at these things? Like, it's not the intern that's writing this thing up and posting it to social media. I mean, there are several people, lawyers, people that, go around a table and believe that this is the right avenue or the right words to go with. And so, I think the most disappointing part in all this to me is that, Boston's an original six team. They're supposed to be a well-respected organization in the National Hockey League. And for all those reasons and more, they should be the ones setting the standard, not falling extremely short. So, I mean, to me, it's just, what the hell are we doing? I mean, I'm all for second chances, but those second chances need to be earned. It's not time served, it's effort made. And for just what we saw play out, and just it's a black eye on the Boston Bruins, it's a black eye on the National Hockey League, and yet another reminder that when NHL organizations come out and say that they've done, extensive investigations, or they've done their due diligences on matters that require a strong deal of due diligence over serious issues, don't take them for their word. And that's not just on the public, that's on sports reporters, that's on people who go to these press conferences. It's on us. And it's our responsibility to challenge what is done. And ultimately that happened. I mean, it wasn't like they got away with it and ultimately ended in this. It's just a sad situation that just feels all too preventable when you see how it played out.
No, I'm with you. I mean, preventable is a perfect way of putting this. Listen, there was a lot of bullshit in the statements that came out from the Miller side of things. There was a lot of things that were overlooked. There was a lot of things that were misrepresented. To saying that, like, this wasn't one particular incident. I mean, there was one disgusting incident that got him charged. But I mean, if you hear from the family and the mother, this was a pattern of behavior of consistent daily, torture of a young disabled person over the course of a number of years. And for him to say that he's apologized to the family, and then it turned out that he fired off an Instagram DM like days before signing with the Boston Bruins. I mean,
and saying had nothing to do with hockey.
Yeah. I mean, the entire thing left a bad taste in everyone's mouth and egg on the face of the Bruins. And you mentioned, I mean, they had this incredible start to the season. They were 9-1 at the top of the league when that had been mentioned. And it was all, you could tell that there was a lot of work behind the scenes. And I mean, I haven't gone back, but there was an interview with Elliot Friedman with Patrice Bergeron talking about that, literally almost coinciding with the announcement. So this had happened beforehand, and interesting that it wasn't reported. But all of a sudden, like, Bergeron and some of the very respected members of that team, players, were almost having to be put in a situation where they were, I think, were expected to carry the water, and many of them didn't. And I mean, it was just handled so, I'll use your term that you put on Twitter. It was pathetic the way that this had happened. I'm sure Gary Bettman and the people in the National Hockey League office were completely irate because it wasn't something that the Bruins had gone through with them. Don Sweeney looks terrible. Cam Neely looks terrible. And there's a big, big chunk of that Boston Bruins fan base that I think has way less confidence in the people that they're supporting every day when they're watching their games or going to, that they're capable of the thought process of always doing the right thing, because they sure as hell didn't do it last week. And I'm with you. We're not talking about one thing that happened when a kid's 14, because there are second chances. But the way things were put forth, that he had done all of these programs, I mean, it certainly seems like he had done the absolute minimum. In some cases, according to the judge, didn't even take this seriously. And I think all you need to know is the first time that he ever reached out was a couple days before through his social media, not even a call, of where this was going to end up. And just an absolutely embarrassing run of a few days for the Boston Bruins.
Well, I just think you have your answer by the fact that the Boston Bruins never tried to reach out to the victim, get a better idea of what happened, if any kind of effort by the player to apologize, or any degree of apology, and the fact that you can't even do that, it proves one thing: you're not consulting the right people, and I think that's been, whether it was the Winnipeg Jets and Kevin Cheveldayoff over the Kyle Beach stuff, or the Chicago Blackhawks over the Kyle Beach stuff, or all the things we've seen over the last year, year, two, whatever. The reality is it's hockey men need to be taking the decisions, these serious decisions, out of their own hands, and asking the appropriate and right people who understand how to, make amends, or try to make amends, or try to help out, the victim. I mean, there are people who are in the industry who aren't just there to support the victims. They're there to aid the, perpetrators and help them learn from their mistakes. And ultimately, that's, I think, as society, what we want. I mean, you can go on social media and, yell from one end and say that this guy, should get a second chance. If you judge me when I was 14, and then there's the people on the other side who just want to torch the guy immediately and don't care about, any effort he might have done to fix or whatever, improve himself. There are people out there that will give you the answers, and they're not going to charge you like lawyers. They want to help, organizations like the National Hockey League, leagues that have influence and a platform to better society. And that the fact that we constantly, we're constantly given examples of leagues and teams and organizations continuously neglecting that kind of expertise that's so readily available, leads to exactly what we just saw, and will lead to more of that down the road if that isn't something that teams decide to do when faced with very sensitive societal issues.
Jeff Hamilton's with us. Hammer, before we go, and I did, obviously, it was a big story in the National Hockey League. We got a big game tomorrow night. Jets going up against the Dallas Stars, playing for first place, 7-3-1. I thought they steadied the ship and got back to looking a little bit more like Rick Bowness wanted them to look in these wins over the Habs and the Blackhawks. We know what happened last weekend, grand larceny of some points. But, hey, the record's the record. They got a chance to play for first place tomorrow. What do you make of this game tomorrow, and where the Jets have found themselves after their first 11 games of the season?
Yeah, no, obviously a good start as far as points wise. I mean, I don't think you can complain with where the Winnipeg Jets are, particularly when you when you consider, the storylines heading into the season, how there was going to be inevitable growing pains with the implementation of new systems in all areas of the ice. And to be sure, there's certainly been growing pains, but they haven't had to sacrifice a ton of points. I don't think a lot of people would have had the Dallas Stars and Winnipeg Jets game at this juncture as a significant standings like game. But here we are, two teams that have figured out in the early going. You look at the last two games against Montreal and Chicago, not great teams to be sure. But the systems have looked, key. They've looked improved. You know what I mean? They all look, one thing that Rick Bowness has been stressing and the entire coaching staff has been stressing all season was they want, when playing without the puck, all four lines on forward, all three lines on defense to be playing the same. I think the Jets got closer to that over the last two games, and we'll need to continue that way, because what we saw prior to that, I was on that 3-game road trip, through Vegas, Arizona, and LA. 5 out of 6 points is obviously a lot, a good total of points to get in a road trip, but it was almost, you could argue they stole a lot of those points. They had, shouldn't have beat the LA Kings, struggled against the Arizona and certainly didn't deserve a point, if not for Connor Hellebuck against Vegas. So to see them answer back the last two games and get more towards the style in which Rick Bowness wants to play, I think that's good things. I will caution, a little bit here, and not to play Debbie Downer, and I won't do it again. But I remember tweeting out last year, the Jets were 9-3-3 atop the Central Division. The Blue Bombers were, heading into the playoffs, had already clinched the West. And I think at that point, the Winnipeg Ice were first in the country. And I said how great it was to be a Winnipeg sports fan right now. Well, not going to jinx the club this time. I'll stay away from Twitter, but it's one of those things where, yes, it's great that they're playing this way, but you need to sustain the play you have. And because the games are only getting more difficult, and no one knows that better than Rick Bowness and the rest of the Jets.
Well, it should be a great one tomorrow. Connor Hellebuck is playing as well as anybody in the National Hockey League, maybe at any position right now, giving a team a chance to win each and every night, and very much looking forward to the game tomorrow. What beat are you on over the course of this week? All about the West Final and the blue and gold, or a little back and forth with the pucks as well?
I think I'm going to be focusing mostly on the CFL and the Bombers. This is my favorite time of year to cover the CFL. I do enjoy covering the Jets, but, start of the regular season, end of the, what could be the start of a three-peat with the Bombers. I'm going to lean towards the CFL, and of course, covering Sunday's West Final. And the week after that, win or lose, I'll be in Regina for a stretch of days. For Grey Cup week, and certainly looking forward to that. But yeah, I think all three down football for the foreseeable future for me.
Well, can't wait. We'll look forward to all of your work in the Free Press coming up leading into Sunday, and of course Grey Cup week and another trip. Ted's going out to Regina with you. Will we have a Grey Cup edition of Jeff and Ted's Excellent Adventures on the Instagram feed?
I think that is the plan. I know things might change a little bit if the Bombers don't get in, but at the same time, I also think Teddy will make that trip regardless, and we'll see if we can't get the old Instagram machine up and running again for what should be a great week. Unfiltered, I'm not sure about that, but certainly a fun one, as it always is every year for the final week of the CFL.
Well, let's hope that Ted doesn't have to worry about any ifs and the Bombers get it done on Sunday afternoon. We're going to talk about it now that we've got the matchup with Ed Tait coming up right away. Hammer, thanks for doing this, man. Have a great Monday night.
Always a pleasure, Huss. Thanks for having me on, and shout out to the viewers. You guys run the show.
Yeah, speaking of the viewers, Hammer always brings them out. We're well over 400 right now in the chat, almost at 450. Folks, if you have not already hit that red subscribe button, please do. What are you waiting for? You get the freshest WST content anytime you log into YouTube. And of course, make sure you're subscribing on your favorite podcast platform as well. And while you're here, we got over 450 people in and only 129 likes. Please, very simply, click that thumbs up button. Helps us spread the channel. We're going to get to the game coming up with Ed Tait in just a minute. Of course, tickets still on sale. There still are some left, so let's pack that place and maybe take it up a notch if that's possible from last year's legendary West Final against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. One thing you're definitely going to want to do is bundle up, make sure you're warm, and get there early. Princess Auto tailgate zone outside the stadium will include some warming areas, hot chocolate, and of course, $5 beers, $3.50 hot dogs, $3.50 pops, DJ Finesse spinning, and the best atmosphere outside a stadium in the Canadian Football League. Princess Auto's proud sponsors of the Bombers and of Winnipeg Sports Talk. And Princess Auto is the place where you'll find the best deals and the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Our friends at Culligan Water continue to be the go-to people for all things water and water related here in the city of Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. And they've been doing it for over 65 years as a family-owned business with everything that you might need. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop down and see them at 1200 Sargent Avenue. You can give them a call at 694-5180 and check out all their products and services for your family, your cottage, or your office online at drinkculligan.com. There was quite the lineup on Saturday for the Manitoba Liquor and Lottery Spirits of Distinction Awards and drop. And part of that is some of the best whiskeys in the world were released. And one of those is the Canadian Club, the final chapter in the Canadian Club Chronicles series. The 45-year-old Canadian Club released only 80 bottles in the province of Manitoba. If you were hoping to get your hands on one, I would get to your local Manitoba liquor marts ASAP or find out where still has one and make sure you grab that for you whiskey lovers. And of course, the game coming up on Sunday, there'll be plenty of Canadian Club keeping fans warm. And of course, you can also have the great taste of the Canadian Club and ginger ale ready to drink in cans. You can pick it up at the Bomber game or at your local beer store in 6-packs. And just before we bring in Ed Tait, don't forget, we've got a big Monday nighter tonight between the Baltimore Ravens and the New Orleans Saints. We'll get to the line at the end of the program and our Coolbet lines. But BP's the place to be. Still have time to enter in for their second grand prize, trip for 2 to watch the NFL and NHL in Vegas on New Year's Eve weekend. Raiders-Niners game on Sunday, and on New Year's Eve, you'll also go to see the Vegas Golden Knights and the Blues. Airfare, hotel, all included. Enter to win tonight at your local Boston Pizza, and make sure to check out the new soon-to-be faves off the new fall menu, including the craveable jalapeno popper dip. Had that last week. Was awesome. Spicy buffalo mac and cheese and the amazing creamy carbonara pizza. NFL, enter to win at all local Boston Pizzas, Portage, Winnipeg, Selkirk, Steinbach, and Morden as well. All right. Bombers and Lions, Sunday afternoon. I think we've got Eddie Tait with us. Let's see if we can bring Ed in, although I'm not sure whether we've got video for Ed. Ed, can you hear me okay? We don't have Ed right now. Well,
I'm working on it. I'll get him in here in a sec.
You know what? I tell you what, why don't we do this, Jeremy? Do we have Rick Bonus ready to go?
Yes, we do.
You know what? I'll tell you what, folks. We do have the coach's audio. So I was going to do this after we bring on Ed. But maybe right now we'll hear from Rick Bonus, Winnipeg Jets head coach, who spoke today after practice over at Canada Life Center. We'll hear from Coach. And while we do that, we'll get Ed set up and we'll bring Eddie on for a little bit of West final preview and the latest for the Bombers, who have been on the practice field for the last few days. So while we get ready with Ed, let's hear from Winnipeg Jets head coach Rick Bonus, who spoke after practice this morning at the downtown arena.
Rick, maybe start off with where do you think and I don't know how many different areas there would be, but the one or two maybe significant improvements you've made as a hockey club to where you are going into this second meeting compared to very early in the year when you played Dallas?
Again, I think defensively we've tightened it up. I know that, listen, we're getting great goaltending from both our goalies, which you absolutely have to have. So the goals against have come down, the chances against have come down. Both specialty teams, I know that was only the second game of the year, but the specialty teams have been a little sharper lately, so it's a kind of an improvement in all those areas. We're scoring some goals when we need to.
And looking at the video, have you noticed any significant differences in how Dallas is playing now? Now that it's not the second game, there's a few games under the belt compared to when you had them.
It's hard to pinpoint. They've got five different players. I think Jimmy's done a good job of bringing those 5 additions in, and now different people are in different roles than they were. But they're scoring goals. So they're getting. Before Jake went down, he was playing great. Wedgie's a great goalie as well, so they're getting the goaltending as well. But I think the 5 additions that Jim brought in have fit in very, very well. And again, getting guys in the right roles, and they're well balanced.
Rick, obviously, when you come to a new team, you want them to succeed, but I imagine you want to see your old employer do well as well. So this is kind of a dream scenario to have a first place battle here.
Well, it's, again, talk to the players about that. It's these are all going to be meaningful games now. Okay, like last year at the end of the year, you're not playing meaningful games. You're playing for your pride. Right now, we're playing meaningful games, and it's regardless who it is, and it's a battle for first place, and just as important, it's a divisional game. So those things will take care of themselves through time. But again, anytime you play your divisional opponent, regardless who it is, you want to win that one. So it's nice to be in. I'd rather be in a battle for first than the battle for 7th and 8th.
We've watched you in practice and training camp and whatnot. We know you're quite vocal on the ice, but it seemed like there was maybe a little extra chatter out there today. Is that just a case you don't want this team to get comfortable? You want to kind of keep the foot on the gas here?
That, and it was a day off yesterday. So when you come out after a day off, sometimes you're a little sluggish, so we gotta get going. It's going to be a very fast. It's going to be a great hockey game tomorrow night. They're playing obviously well. Pete's done a great job there. Give Pete and his staff one. They're playing great hockey. So you give Pete and his staff a lot of credit. And it's going to be a high tempo game. So today's practice had to be at tempo. When I saw it drop down a little bit, you got to get after him.
Rick, what did you see from the Kyle Capobianco and Jansen in their season debuts for the
I
club?
thought they both did the jobs we needed them to do. Kyle went out and played a very steady game, and just moved the puck during the rush. No mistakes. That's what we needed from him. That's what he showed us in training camp in the preseason and in the practices that we've had. And Harks gave us good energy. He was in on the forecheck, and he uses it when he's using his speed, and he's putting a lot of pressure on the opposition. He's an effective player.
What have you learned about Adam Lowry's game that maybe you didn't know before being around him on a daily basis?
I see him pretty much what I thought I'd see from him. Big, dominant guy in the middle, and excellent penalty killer. Big, strong guy around the net in the power play. Very competitive guy. Gets emotional on the bench, which I love. I love seeing the passion, and he comes off the ice, he gets mad, right, when things aren't going good. So I love that about him. And so it's probably that more than anything, that he's how much of a competitor he is.
Rick, you did a lot of fun activities in Banff and all that. You also had some leadership training, I think, for the team and that sort of thing. Why is that important to do that as a team? To kind of, I don't know, looking for your kind of explanation.
I think it goes back to my conversations with the players all summer. A lot of guys said they wanted to have more of a voice, so we're giving it to them, and we're going to help them. We're going to help them with that. So it's their room, and which we've talked about enough this year. But it goes back to those conversations. Okay, you want the room? We're going to give it to you, and we're going to help you come up with that, with the culture in the room.
Yeah, it's kind of written on the walls a little bit in there. Is that important? Like, have you seen that as a team before?
Yeah.
It seems like a player-led thing.
Yeah, no, I've seen that before. It all goes back to, okay, so we talk a lot about be a good teammate. Well, what's a good teammate to you might be different than what a good teammate to him is. So now when you have those group discussions, and we're talking about, okay, what does being a good teammate mean to you, and you, then you come up with the kind of the guidelines of everyone on board, and everybody wants to follow them. So, yeah, again, it's their room, and like I told you before, like the bad teams are led by no one, average teams are led by coaches, and good teams are led by players. That's where we're trying to get to.
Good quote. Ehlers and Stanley, or are we still? Do we have a timeline on Ehlers yet?
No, Stanley's still a couple of weeks. So,
yeah.
But Ehlers told me today, and the trainers, he's making progress. I'm hoping, again, as of now, that we get him skating by the end of the week. Just speak loud, Mike.
I usually do. I'm usually pretty loud about this stuff. The process of you becoming a head coach down there was a little bit odd, but are you happy that it happened, that you got this chance to become a head coach again?
Yeah, I'd say that was odd. Very often a coach takes over when the team's playing pretty well. So it was unfortunate. Honestly, it was unfortunate for Jim, and I'm thrilled that Jim is back behind the bench in Boston and doing a great job there. Good for him, because he's an excellent coach, and I'm very, very happy for him. But that whole tenure was weird. I mean, the canceling the season, the bubble, 3 training camps the one year. I remember we got COVID, and then we had the snowstorm, and it was just so the whole thing was weird. But yeah, very thankful that Jimmy gave me the opportunity. There's no question about that.
And then Jason Robertson's first star of the week. What did you learn about him when he was down there?
Just, he's talking to a couple of guys about him today. He's got great vision. And it's his poise and confidence with the puck that goes hand in hand, and the line's a perfect combination of speed and power with Rupe, and then you've got the other 2 guys that are very smart and know how to use the ice and see the ice and use each other and feed off each other and read off each other. Like, that's what Rupe drives it with the speed, and then they have both of them, Pav and Robo, have the ability to see the ice and have the skills to back it up. But with Robo, it's always been, there's never been a shortage of confidence, but that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. But if you remember his first year, it was the work ethic we didn't like, so we had to sit him on a little bit, and then he caught on, and now he's working hard and became a little more of a 200-foot player.
All right, there's the coach. Rick Bowness will be all over tomorrow night's tilt between the Jets and Stars and tomorrow's edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk, although we'll also be talking Ice and Red Deer Rebels. Don't forget 15-0 versus 15-1 Tuesday and Wednesday at the Ice Cave. And if you go to the Ice website right now, we've got a 2-for-1 deal where you get the both games for the price of one. And of course, all their 2 for Tuesday specials tomorrow night. So a couple of great options and big games tomorrow here in the city, both the Canada Life Center and the NHL, and with the WHL down at the Ice Cave. All right, Ed Tait is teed up. Just before we do that, I got to give a thanks to Nick and Nikki over the Nick and Nikki DQ group for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. 4 locations in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. The DQ in Niverville, home of the newest MJHL team, the Nighthawks, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. 12 months a year, the Blizzard is still the best. They've got some amazing flavors right now, including the Reese's Pieces Cookie Dough Blizzard, my personal favorite. Amazing burgers with the new line of stack burgers at DQ and all sorts of great treats, including ice cream novelties you can take home. And if you need a DQ ice cream cake for an upcoming party or an event, you can also get at them on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. Send them a pic, let them know exactly what you're looking for, and they'll have it ready for you for a quick and easy pickup at your local Nick and Nikki DQ. And hey, what a weekend it was. I'm sure many of you had a few ice cold 1919s or other Little Brown Jug favorites. Some great new Little Brown Jug beers come out, including the Grolsch. Highly recommended, I can tell you. Tried that on the weekend. Was awesome. But maybe the best place to go is down to the brewery and tap room on William Avenue. Meet some of the gang down there. Try all the great Little Brown Jug beers, including the newest releases. And you can take it home as well from Little Brown Jug, along with a great selection of merchandise. But if you're not downtown, you can find Little Brown Jug, including the new Good Times Variety Pack, at your favorite local beer store. And the 1919's on tap at fine bars and restaurants throughout the city as well. Make sure you check that out. And I have a feeling there might be a few 1919's in the parking lot going on before Sunday afternoon, because the Bomber Nation is ready to go for the West Final. And now the Winnipeg Blue Bombers know who they're playing. It is the BC Lions. Ed Tait's got a full West Final preview up right now at bluebombers.com. And Eddie joins us now to look ahead to Sunday. Edward, what's up? How are you doing? What did you think of those games yesterday?
They were fantastic games. You got me distracted, though. I've been thinking about tailgating with you and having some 1919s. That would be fun.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to do that in a celebratory fashion in a few weeks after the big game in Regina. Hey, just quickly before, I know we're going to focus in on the Bombers, what did you think of the Alouettes' performance against the Ticats? There was a lot of people that thought that the Ticats were sort of peaking at the end of the season, but it was Montreal who put together a real complete game yesterday, I thought.
You know, if going into yesterday, I would have picked Montreal and Calgary to win. And the reason I liked Montreal is, you know, you always look at the quarterback position in the playoffs, and I just thought there was more consistency with Trevor Harris than with what Dane Evans was giving the Ticats of late, or all season, I guess. And I think that kind of played out yesterday. A lot of inconsistency in Dane Evans' game this year, and, you know, he gets replaced in the game. And Trevor Harris does just enough. Their defense played really well. They're full credit. That's going to be a good East Final with them going into Toronto, because hopefully some Alouette fans travel with them, and because I don't know if there's such a thing as home field advantage in Toronto with the low crowds they get. So that will be a fun one.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I hope people step up and get out. This should be a great football game, and even more interesting considering an individual wearing number 33. That sounds like he's going to be back just in time for the playoffs, Ed.
Yeah, it's always an interesting storyline with 33 in the playoff start. We saw that here in Winnipeg for a couple of years, didn't we? He's a difference maker. He's a future Hall of Famer. I was a bit surprised because the Argos have had a pretty good ground game without him. But when you get a chance to bring a guy like that back that can push the pile, that can bring so much energy, so much stuff off the field, all the stuff that he does on the field, pass protection as a receiver, as a running back, of course. This is why the Argos brought him in the offseason for, in particular, a game like this, and then they hope in the Grey Cup as well.
Well, let's get to the West Final. We knew that it was going to be a hell of a football game between two very, very good teams, and regardless of who won, the Bombers would need to be up for the challenge on Sunday at home field. But it was the BC Lions that got it done. A brilliant defensive performance, first and foremost. I mean, that was the unit to me that won it, but very strange that we didn't see more of that Calgary running game that was so vaunted, that did have limited success, but had limited opportunities as well. How did you see that going on, Ed? What were the keys? Why are the BC Lions coming here to Winnipeg and not the Calgary Stampeders in your mind?
Yeah, you used the term strange. I thought there was a lot of strange going on with the Stampeders yesterday in terms of some of their decision-making on short yardage. You know, a lot of penalties, which are uncharacteristic for them. Their defense played pretty well. They got, I thought, mediocre play from Jake Maier before they made the quarterback change. Some would argue that it came too late to Bo Levi Mitchell. But give the Lions credit. You know, Nathan Rourke, you can tell he's not 100%, but he threw for 300 yards yesterday. They got close to 100 yards from James Butler along the ground. They've got a lot of weapons on offense, but you do have to tip your hat to what they did defensively, because they made Jake Maier's life a little bit miserable. And even after the quarterback change, they still got after it. That's a good football team. You know, it's a shame that a 12-6 team like the Stampeders has to go on the road for their one playoff game, but we don't want to get into a debate about the CFL playoff format, I guess. But, you know, this is just an electric matchup as far as I'm concerned for the West Final, with BC rolling in here and all the storylines that are kind of wrapped around this one.
I certainly would not have been on BC if the game was in Calgary. I think that the elements of playoff football, home crowd are huge. And credit to the BC Lions, first of all, the organization, for how hard they've worked this year under their new owner. I remember the vibe around that building for their opener. They got a great crowd yesterday, and I think all of that played into the hands of the Lions, of the home team, who are now coming here. But Ed, I would suggest that not only is the BC Lions moving up a weight class as far as their opponent, they're also moving up a weight class as far as what they're going to be dealing with outside of the white lines, with the weather and with the crowd. We hope that place is going to be packed as tickets continue to sell well for the game. How much of an impact do you think the Winnipeg weather and the Winnipeg faithful can have on the West Final and send the Bombers to another Grey Cup?
Well, it's huge, right? We call it home ice advantage in a way, right? You kind of hope for the conditions to be really poor here. And, some of the guys here in the office, we were looking at the forecast in Surrey, BC, where the Lions practice this week, and it's all +4, +5, +6 this week. And so, you can talk about getting acclimatized to the Winnipeg weather, but I don't think you really do. I think you have to practice in this. You have to feel that wind in your face. You have to kick a frozen football, try to catch a frozen football and hold on to it to kind of really understand how difficult it is. And I think that's a massive advantage for Winnipeg. And on top of that, even we saw it last year, Huss, you and I have talked about this many times. Even when the conditions were crappy last year, this building was full. It was rocking. It's one of the most amazing football games I've covered in Winnipeg in terms of that kind of environment. I think that's a huge factor on Sunday. So, let's make sure this building is packed. And if it gets to -5 or -10, as everybody knows around here, just layer up and get ready to go. We'll see if the Lions even know how to layer up or what it means.
Well, exactly. I mean, we can talk about Nathan Rourke being a Canadian quarterback, and he was playing in Ohio, and he's from BC. So I'm not sure he has very much experience playing on the prairies in late November. But this Winnipeg Blue Bomber football team does, and they've been practicing throughout the weekend. Fill us in a little bit on what the Bombers have been up to over the course of the bye week. I know you've been there on a daily basis. They practiced 3 times. What have they been working on? How do things look? And where are we at with the health of this team and any question marks going into the final?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people have this idea that during a bye week, everybody heads home and, gets on the barbecue, has a few beers and, binge watches things on Netflix. These guys have been here all last week and practiced 3 times, kind of prepared for both the Lions or the Stampeders. They've been all in. This is an interesting team. They like coming to work. They like hanging out with each other. They like doing the film work. It's very noticeable, and they're geeked up. As much as a bye week is good for the body to kind of get a rest, I think these guys are just itching to play. You get into the routine where you're going once a week, and I think that this is going to be a bunch of kind of rabid dogs by the time Sunday rolls around because they're hungry and they want to get back to it.
Well, for sure. And not only that, I mean, when you think about the schedule, bye week last week, some of those guys played for part of that final game. Then there was another bye and a game that many of them missed beforehand. So the health should be a big advantage for the Bombers because they haven't been, especially some of their top guys, haven't had a ton of reps and wear and tear over the last little while. But at the same time, I mean, you want to practice and you want to stay on top of things because, well, for those exact reasons. But man, I think, a healthy Bomber team going in against a team that just had a war with a very good team puts them in a good position. I noticed Adam Bighill wasn't at practice one of the days over the course. I mean, where's he at? Is there anyone else that, is taking a bit of time off over these practices, or otherwise are the Bombers looking pretty darn healthy?
Well, it was interesting at the end of practice on Saturday, I'm going to guess, right near the end, like the third last play before practice ended, Nick Dembski and Adam Bighill kind of were combating for a ball, and Bighill went down on a pile and got up and kind of walked around, but didn't finish practice. Nick Dembski practiced yesterday. I guess it was Saturday. And Nick Dembski practiced yesterday, and then Adam did not. We asked Coach O'Shea after practice if he had any concerns about Biggie not being available for Sunday, and he said no. And if you know the guy, I mean, he'd be in a full body cast coming out, wheeling out on a wheelchair, and he'd still figure out a way to play. So it was a concern in the moment. We'll see what happens at practice this week if he gets out there and how much work he gets. They are getting really healthy. I mean, we know that Greg Ellingson and Drew Olatarski came back for the last game. So did Jackson Jeffcoat. Those guys have been practicing. Demario Houston, who's been out for quite a while, was getting a fair bit of work on Saturday and Sunday, so he's an option in the secondary potentially. It's this is why you battle so hard to get first place, is to get this extra time to heal up. And you talked about the war that went on in Vancouver yesterday. You know, a lot of those they seemed to come out okay. The Lions did, but you know, you take a shot on the knee, you take a shot on the shoulder, you wake up, you've got a sore ankle. All those things can lead into this week, and then it's one and done time, right? You got to get it done, or else you're going home. And I think the Bombers are in a good spot health wise.
Eddie, and I know we'll be all over this this week here on Winnipeg Sports Talk as we get closer and closer to game day on Sunday. But anything fans need to know other than get your ticket right now if you don't have one already? Anything else we need to let people give them a heads up on about what will be a huge day for the organization and the fan base?
Yeah, the only thing I've seen so far, Huss, the staff has a game day meeting later in the week, but I know that the tailgate area will be open a little bit earlier, and you know, I'm sure the $5 beer thing's still in effect. Look, just layer up. That's what I keep telling people that are going to come to the game. It's going to be fun. I mean, you can talk about the environment in the stands last year, Huss, on December 5th for that West Final. So we're a few weeks ahead of that. I don't know if the weather's going to be as bad as it was then, but if you want, it's just kind of an electric. I keep using that word, but it was such a fun time, and people stayed to the end, and it was just an amazing experience. So if you can figure out how to way to stay warm, whatever way that might be, it's worth being here because it's fun as hell to experience it live.
Oh, well worth it. And the fact that the cold last year and what the fans had to sort of make it through made it that much better, I think. You know, I mean, it was almost like the fans were playing in the game too. I mean, they needed to have that level of commitment and toughness that a lot of the players had to. And gang, if you did miss that game last year, Ed, you know, I mean, there's no hyperbole there. It was the most magical atmosphere in the most special environment. I can remember being a Bomber fan pretty much my entire life. And, you know, the Grey Cups are one thing, you know, because it's the end of it all. But for it to happen at home and how big of a part the crowd played in that game. Let's not forget the Bombers turned the football over 5 times in the first half. But the defense, the crowd came through, and then Zach and the gang got it done in the second half. So if you are able to make a point of counting yourself in for what should be another very special afternoon, hopefully with the same end result. And we'll be talking about the Bombers playing in the Grey Cup next week. Eddie, thanks for doing this. I know you'll be all over everything in Bomberland at bluebombers.com this week. And if anything comes up, if you need us to speak to the fans on anything else coming out for the game, you make sure to let me know. And we'll be getting it to the people here on Winnipeg Sports Talk as we get closer to kickoff on Sunday afternoon.
Appreciate you having me on, Huss. Thanks a lot, man. Take care.
All the best. There it is, our guy, Ed Tait. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Ed Tait WFC. And the West Final preview is up right now at bluebombers.com with Ed Tait breaking down the BC Lions visit to Winnipeg to take on the Bombers. And the Bombers 2 wins away right now from a 3rd consecutive Grey Cup championship. All right, let's get to the Coolbet line today. Man, I had a good week last week. This is going to be tough. It'll be tough to follow it up. But my guy Mahomes came through big time, plus 650 on the most passing yards of Sunday, which was nice. That was a grind, though. Tennessee Titans, I don't know. They got the Chiefs' number when it comes to defense. Chiefs had absolutely no running game yesterday. And it was all on the broad shoulders of one Patrick Mahomes to get that win, and they did. A couple of other shocking losses, though, yesterday. I mean, the Packer fans, I'm not even going to pile on anymore. I mean, you guys have been through enough so far this year. But a loss to the Detroit Lions was somehow made it worse, this losing streak that they've been in right now. And the Vikings, credit to them, big comeback in the 4th quarter against the Commanders, thanks in part to a big pick from Taylor Heineke to Harrison Smith. Vikes now 7-1, and for all intents and purposes, pretty much clinched the NFC North. I know there's still half a season left, but man, you look at what's left of that division with the Packers, the Lions, and the Bears. Although, man, even in a loss, Justin Fields sparking some real excitement in that Chicago fan base. All-time record, 178 yards on the ground for a quarterback in an NFL game yesterday. Hope you had him in your fantasy lineup. We do have one game tonight in the National Football League. It is Monday Night Football. Don't forget Boston Pizza, some great specials, and your chance to win tonight at your local BP. Ravens at Saints. No Mark Andrews for the Ravens. I think that is a huge, huge factor tonight. There's going to be a lot on the shoulders and the legs of Lamar Jackson. And Andy Dalton and the Saints, 1.5-point underdogs tonight at home in the Monday Nighter. The total in the game is 46.5 right now. Baltimore on the money line, -119. And the Saints, +110. If you missed the lock shop earlier today, you can check out our Twitter feed. But actually, go on Twitter at LockShopBets. You'll see the pinned tweet with the link to our new YouTube channel. Click on that, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and retweet that tweet, and you'll be entered to win a draw for $1,000. We're giving away a G-Note to a lucky subscriber when we get to 1,000 subs. And, of course, all the Lock Shop content there. Myself, Dustin Nielsen. Dusty's going to join us on the program tomorrow for his thoughts on the upcoming West Final. He'll, of course, be here calling it for TSN. So, yeah, help the boys out. Get over there to the Lock Shop YouTube channel. Link is at Lock Shop Bets, and subscribe. And if you haven't seen it before, you can check out what I'm usually doing an hour before we go live with Winnipeg Sports Talk each and every day. NHL tonight, 3 games. The St. Louis Blues, talked about them with Ren a little earlier on. They've lost 6 straight in regulation. That loss streak started here in Winnipeg a couple weeks ago today, and it's not getting any easier for the St. Louis Blues. They go up against the Boston Bruins team that lost for the second time of the year Saturday night to the Leafs. Bruins a -208 favorite. The St. Louis Blues +174. Calgary's been struggling. They're on the road. They'll take on the New York Islanders early on. Calgary's still favored, though, -118. The Islanders at even money or +101 as a slight home underdog. And the other game tonight in the National Hockey League is the Edmonton Oilers -154 and the Washington Capitals +132. And, I should mention, we did do a little partner parlay with the fellows on the Lock Shop today. If you like this one, my pick was Lamar Jackson over 60.5 rushing yards. Pat went Alvin Kamara over 38.5 receiving yards. Dusty's on Justin Tucker over 7.5 kicking points. And Jake's throwing in with an Andy Dalton pick. So all those come through. We got it juiced up to 10-1. So +1,000 right now. Lock Shop Partner Parlay. It's there in the Coolbet exclusives. We made some people some money last week on the exclusive. This is a little bit more of a longer shot, but certainly if you're looking for a little action on the game tonight, might be a great spot to do it. Riding with us on the Lock Shop. And hey, don't forget, if you've never played at Coolbet before, use the promo code WST when you're making your first deposit. We'll hook you up with a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit over at Coolbet. All right, great show today. We'll probably get a little bit more into the aftermath of the NFL week tomorrow on the program. We'll, of course, be setting up a big game for the Winnipeg Jets, battle for first place in the Central with the Dallas Stars. Brian Munz is going to pop by and set up maybe the most incredible back-to-back matchup we'll have all season long in the Western Hockey League. The 15-0 Red Deer Rebels against the 15-1 Winnipeg Ice. They're playing Tuesday and Wednesday at the Ice Cave. Special deal right now. Buy one ticket and get tickets for both games. Find out more at the Ice website. Munzie will fill us in on that tomorrow. And make sure to join us tomorrow. Our friends at Not Autocorp are doing a little contest for some tickets to that West Final. You can check out Not Autocorp, follow them on their social platforms, but we'll fill you in on that and how you can enter to win a couple tickets courtesy of Not to the game coming up this weekend. Great show today. Thanks to Rennie for jumping on. Thanks to Jeff Hamilton, of course, and Ed Tait. Jeremy doing a great job. Back again for another week, firing up the Rick bonus and more. That's going to do it for us. Enjoy this football game tonight and get ready for a big one tomorrow at Canada Life Center and a big one tomorrow here on Winnipeg Sports Talk live at 1. On your way out, folks, if you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up button. Helps us spread the channel. And if you haven't already, make sure you've subscribed right here on YouTube by hitting the red subscribe button. and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts as well. Just type in Winnipeg Sports Talk and make sure you're getting the audio feed as soon as it's available after the show each and every Monday to Friday afternoon. That's going to do it for us, folks. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow on a big first place game day edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.